Well, hello, here we are on Tuesday. We're on day 2 of our Bible reading this week, and today our passage is Lamentations chapter 2. Now remember, Lamentations is a book within which a poet is processing the devastating and terrifying events that have taken place in Jerusalem. Foreign armies have come in, invaded the capital city and destroyed everything. And here in chapter 2, he is poetically describing some of what happened. Let me read just a few verses from the beginning of the chapter for you. Verse 1. How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool in the day of his anger. The Lord has swallowed up without mercy all the habitations of Jacob. In his wrath he has broken down the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He has brought down to the ground in dishonor the kingdom and its rulers. He has cut down in fierce anger all the might of Israel. He has withdrawn from them his right hand in the face of the enemy. He has burned like a flaming fire in Jacob, consuming all around. And on and on. It doesn't make for pretty reading. There's one word that repeats itself over and over again in those verses, and it's the word down. Down, down, down. The Lord has thrown down, cut down, reduced down. That's the picture of what has happened to the city and to the people of Israel. They have been thrown down. It's not a pretty picture, but perhaps the most shocking aspect of the poet's writing here is that he attributes all of this to the Lord. Now we know it was the Babylonian Empire that did it as you read the story, but he says it's the Lord who is the aggressor. It's the Lord who has done this to his own people. That's a really shocking thing to reflect on, because we're not used to descriptions of God acting in this way. And even if we are used to it, we don't like it. We actually prefer the pictures of God that emphasize his kindness and his mercy and his gentleness more. But here the poet says, no, this is what the Lord has done. And I think if we are going to be serious students of the Bible, it's important that we just sit with this for a bit and chew on it and allow it to unsettle us and allow it to shock us. It is the Lord who, the poet says, did this to Jerusalem. It's also important, if we're serious students of the Bible, to read passages like this in the context of the whole story of the Bible. And what you'll discover as you read the whole story of God's people is that for generations and generations before this moment, God had been warning his people that if they did not live in obedience to him, if they did not live under his authority and worship him and him alone, then something like this would happen. For generations, God had been warning them, saying, follow me, be obedient to me. If you don't, then disaster will come. That's why if you go down to verse 17, it says this, the poet says this, the Lord has done what he purposed. He carried out his word which he commanded long ago. He has thrown down without pity. In other words, the poet is saying everything that's happened is exactly what God said would happen. And so listen, it's a shocking portrait of God, but at the same time, let's not make the mistake of imagining that this was just some erratic explosion of anger on God's part. No. This is the result of generations and generations of the people rebelling against God and of God warning them about what would happen. But it's still a shocking thing to think about, isn't it? You know, in Romans chapter 11, verse 22, Paul says this. He says, consider the kindness and the severity of God. The kindness and the severity of God. We often like to consider the kindness of God, but it's passages like this that should force us to consider also the severity or the sternness of God. So it's important that we sit with passages like this. It's important that we read them in the context of what had come before, but it's also important that we read passages like this in light of what will come later. Because as I read these first few verses, it made me think of something else, or more specifically, someone else. Let me read it to you again. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. So it made you think about another moment in history. It makes me think of the cross. It makes me think about the moment when the glory of God, the manifest glory of God, was cast down from heaven to earth. It makes me think of Jesus. It makes me think of Jesus. And so as we read it in the light of that story, what we discover is, yes, God is stern and God is just and God will not let sin run and run and run. But at the same time, as we read the whole story, what we discover is that God, in the person of Jesus, is someone who is willing to come and take on the suffering, to take on the consequences of the sin of his people. And as you read through Lamentations, you're going to see loads of descriptions of what happened to Jerusalem that should remind you of what happened to Jesus. Anyway, we'll leave it there. You can read some more and reflect some more and meditate some more, but I'm going to go on too long. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll be back tomorrow for chapter 3.